heart of a dusty old village called Neko, surrounded by thick forests and whispering winds, lived a woman named Regina. That morning, the sky wore a gray blanket. Cocks had crowed, dogs barked, but Regina sat quietly on a wooden bench in front of her mud house. Her eyes were dry, but her soul wept. Around her, neighbors spoke in low tones, fetching water and roasting maize. She could hear them laugh, but inside, Regina felt invisible. Her hands trembled as she held a broken comb, not for her hair, just to feel something, anything that wasn't bitterness. 15 years. That's how long she had waited to hear a baby cry from her womb. But her house remained silent, empty like a market on burial day. Her husband, John, tried to be kind, but his eyes had started to wander. People gossiped. They whispered things behind her back. Maybe she's cursed, they said. Maybe the gods shut her womb. Regina would hear them sometimes and smile, but the smile never reached her heart. She had prayed, bathed in rivers, chewed roots, but nothing worked. The silence of childlessness haunted her day and night. Then one day, without warning, everything changed. John came home with another woman. Young, pretty, smelling of palm oil and honey. Her name is Amaka, he said. She will help us carry children. Help? Regina's heart cracked like a gourd under a speeding cart. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat on the edge of her bamboo bed, listening to crickets chirp and owls hoot. She bit her lips to stop herself from crying, but tears still came. No one saw her. No one knew. The village went on laughing, cooking, dancing, but inside Regina's heart, war had started. Months passed like crawling snails. Amaka's belly grew round and proud like a drum before a festival. Regina watched it every day. She cooked food she didn't taste, washed clothes she no longer cared about. Sometimes she'd hear John laughing with Amaka in the next room. That laughter felt like a hammer on her chest. But she endured, until the day of the birth. The whole village gathered like it was a celebration. 2 boys, twins. Strong lungs, full heads of hair, and eyes that sparkled like the river under moonlight. Regina stood in the corner, clapping, smiling, but her spirit had collapsed. Something inside her shifted that day. She no longer felt like herself. Jealousy didn't just grow in her, it poisoned her blood. Every time those boys cried, her ears burned. Every time Amaka smiled, she clenched her teeth. The village praised Amaka. A blessed woman, they called her. And Regina? Forgotten. Like a shadow in daylight. She stopped going to the stream. Her face became stone. Her feet heavy. Her voice quieter than ever before. She no longer dreamed of having her own child. She only dreamed of making the pain disappear. But fate wasn't done yet. It came like a silent snake through the bushes. A strange wind swept across Neko. Children began to cough. Adults shook with fever. Farmers collapsed beside their hoes. The air smelled different, like burnt leaves and fear. The villagers didn't understand it. Medicine failed. The local herbalist fled. People whispered again. It's a curse, they said. The gods are angry. The village chief died. The town crier died. And then John and Amaka. Regina stared at their lifeless bodies, but she didn't cry. She only stared at the twins, barely 5 months old, now orphans. Her mind cracked. Why them, she asked herself again and again. Why didn't the disease take all of them? Every day she looked at the twins, she didn't see babies. She saw chains. She saw the woman who came into her home and took everything, her name, her pride, her place beside John. Feeding the boys felt like feeding her enemy. Changing their wrappers felt like sewing her own coffin. Every cough they made, every movement became a reminder that Regina had lost. But the village praised her. She's strong, they said. Still caring for the boys. If only they knew. On the second night after the funeral, something broke. The wind howled louder than usual. Regina sat in silence, staring at the boys asleep on the mat. They looked peaceful. Too peaceful. Something boiled in her chest. Her hands moved without thought. She wrapped the babies in faded wrappers, one on her back, one in her arms. She stepped out barefoot into the night. No one saw her. The village slept under the weight of death. Dogs didn't bark. Owls didn't hoot. She walked toward the thick forest path, her heart beating like a talking drum. The forest was darker than usual. The moon had hidden its face. Branches scratched her arms. Mosquitoes hummed in her ears. But she didn't turn back. She walked deeper. Past the palm trees. Past the hunter's trail. Past the old termite hill that glowed slightly in the night. And there, under a wide silk cotton tree, she stopped. She looked at the babies again. They whimpered. One sneezed. Her breath caught in her throat. Her fingers trembled, but her feet didn't move. She laid them down on dry leaves, covered them gently, and stepped back. One more look, and then she turned around. Her heart was racing, not from fear but from the weight of what she had done. She didn't speak a word, just walked away, deeper into the shadows, disappearing from the path she came. Behind her, the twins began to cry. It started softly, like the bleat of a goat, then louder, then desperate. But the forest swallowed their voices. No one heard, no one came. The wind rustled, the trees swayed. Somewhere far off, a leopard growled. A bat swooped, and the babies cried until they had no strength to cry anymore. Their tiny bodies shivered in the cold night air. By morning, the sun rose slowly, peeking through the branches. Light danced across the forest floor. Ants crawled near the babies. Mosquitoes bit their soft skin. Their lips cracked. They had not eaten in nearly 20 hours. Their throats were dry, their wrappers soaked with dew. They were too weak to cry now. One of them blinked slowly, as if dreaming. The other barely moved. No mother, no food, no comfort. Just the forest watching in silence. But nature has its own plans. Sometimes it sends the wind. Sometimes it sends a person. And that morning someone was coming. The road that led out of Neko was narrow and winding, snaking through thick bushes and tall grasses. That morning, the sun hung low and soft, painting the leaves with golden light. Birds chirped excitedly. A few lizards darted across the red, dusty path. Somewhere far away, a church bell rang twice, its sound floating gently across the air. Sister Magdalene was on her way to a distant village for a church revival. Her car, a worn-out cream-colored Beetle, rattled as she drove. Inside, her rosary danced on the mirror. She hummed to him quietly, tapping her fingers on the steering. Suddenly, her stomach rumbled. Not softly, loud and urgent. She winced and laughed a little. Not now, she thought. But the pressure grew stronger. There was no house in sight, no petrol station, only forest. The road stretched endlessly ahead. So she pulled over beside a bushy bend, carefully parked the car under the shade, grabbed her little handkerchief, and stepped out. The ground felt warm under her sandals. Her white veil fluttered slightly in the breeze as she walked into the thick bushes, holding her skirt away from sharp grass blades and looking for a private spot. She walked deeper, past tall elephant grass, around a fallen tree, and finally found a quiet clearing. She looked around once more, made sure no one was watching, and squatted gently. But then, just as she was about to relieve herself, she froze. A sound. A soft whimper. Her ears perked. She blinked, listening again. There it was. A cry. Faint but real. Like the sound of a kitten, but longer. Sadder. She stood up slowly, heart pounding. Wiping her hands with her handkerchief, she moved carefully toward the sound. The bushes rustled. Something was out there. Or someone. Her shoes crunched against dry twigs as she pushed through. The cry became clearer now, two of them. Weak, trembling, but definitely babies. Her breath caught in her throat. Dear Lord, she whispered under her breath. She pushed past a thorny shrub, then gasped. Before her, under a giant tree, lay two tiny bodies. Wrapped in tattered cloth. Skin pale, lips dry, covered in insect bites. One of them twitched. The other didn't move at all. For a second, she stood frozen, unsure if what she was seeing was real. Her eyes welled up. She dropped to her knees beside them. She touched their faces gently. Burning hot. Feverish. But alive. Barely. Her hands shook. She had once delivered babies in the missionary clinic, but never found any in the forest. Her mind raced. How long had they been here? Who could abandon them like this? She looked around. Nothing but trees and silence. She scooped them up, one in each arm. Their bodies were light, too light. She could feel their ribs through their wrappers. One baby whimpered. The other remained still, eyes closed, breathing shallow. She pressed her cheek to his nose. Still alive. But time was running out. She ran back through the bush, branches scratching her arms. Her legs moved faster than ever before. As she reached her car, she kicked the door open with her foot, gently laid the babies on the back seat, and covered them with her veil. She jumped into the driver's seat and started the engine. The car groaned, coughed, then started. She drove like never before, eyes wide, hands tight on the steering, bouncing through potholes. The nearest clinic was 20 minutes away. Every minute felt like an hour. The babies didn't cry anymore. Just soft breathing and silence. The nurse at the small village clinic rushed out when she saw the Beetle screech to a stop. Twins. Abandoned, Sister Magdalene managed to say. They carried the babies inside. Warm water, soft towels, tiny spoons, sugar water, thermometer. The nurses worked with shaky hands. One baby slowly opened his eyes. The other barely responded. A prayer circle began. They poured in love, warmth, and soft singing. By evening, both babies were asleep, weak but stable. Sister Magdalene watched from the doorway. Her eyes never left them. She didn't eat that night. She just sat beside them, whispering soft hymns. She couldn't sleep either. In the small guest room beside the clinic ward, she laid on the bed but kept staring at the ceiling. Her thoughts swirled. Who could have done this? Why? She imagined the forest, the dangers, the loneliness. She pictured the babies crying into the night, waiting for death. Her heart broke again. That moment changed something in her. She didn't just want to save them. She wanted to raise them, protect them, watch them live. These boys, she felt, were more than just orphans. They were a miracle wrapped in wrappers left under the sky for angels. By morning, she named them. She didn't tell anyone the names. She wrote them in her Bible, underlined twice. Then she began the journey back to her mission house. The clinic gave her baby food, medicine, wrappers, and powdered milk. She carried them gently into the back seat again, this time cleaner and stronger. As she drove, the boys slept peacefully as if they knew their nightmare was over. The road was quiet again. Birds flew overhead. Farmers returned to their fields. But in Sister Magdalene's heart, a fire had been lit. A promise had been made. These boys would live. Her home was small, a 2-room bungalow beside the village church. One room was her prayer room. The other became the nursery. She moved the pews, cleared old clothes, bought a crib with her savings. Days turned into weeks. She bathed them, sang to them, slept beside them on the floor. When they cried, she fed them with soft porridge and warm milk. When they sneezed, she panicked. When they smiled, her heart danced. The village whispered again, "A nun with twins?" But she didn't care. She told no one the full story, only that God sent them to her. She watched as their cheeks filled out, their laughter returned, and their legs grew strong. They crawled. They stood. They fell. They rose again. And all the while, she wrote down everything in a small blue diary. Day 40, they giggled at my hymn. Day 78, first steps on the kitchen floor. She kept every memory, every cough, every smile. She stopped traveling. She stopped preaching in distant villages. Her church grew smaller, but her heart grew bigger. Raising the twins became her ministry. They were no longer the forgotten boys of the forest. They were her sons. She noticed early these were no ordinary children. At 2 years old, they could recite full hymns. At 3, they arranged blocks into letters. At 4, they asked questions about the stars and why rainbows bend. Sister Magdalene stared in wonder. God gave me geniuses, she thought. When she enrolled them in school, the teachers called her within weeks. They're too advanced, they said. They finish exams in minutes. Their minds were sharp, eyes always curious, hearts kind. They never cried for toys, only books. They would read for hours, draw organs on the wall, and ask to see real hospitals. Other children avoided them, not out of fear but awe. They were quiet but brilliant, gentle but deep. At 10, they fixed the broken church fan. At 12, they read medical textbooks borrowed from a retired doctor. Sister Magdalene could barely keep up. Her diary became thicker, her heart fuller. She watched them become young men, with voices like soft thunder and hands that healed injured birds. When a scholarship notice came from the National Science Board, Sister Magdalene wept. The boys had topped a nationwide exam. They were invited to the UK. Full scholarship, full honors. The world was opening. The airplane roared above the clouds like a giant bird with steel wings. Inside, the twin boys sat quietly beside each other, eyes wide, hands resting on their laps. Their first time flying. Their first time leaving Africa. Behind them sat Sister Magdalene, her hands clasped tightly over her Bible, her face calm but tearful. Below them, Neko was a small dot now, just brown roofs and scattered trees fading into the earth's green skin. Ahead was the United Kingdom, a land they had only seen in books and imagined in dreams. The journey of destiny had officially begun. They landed in London during the soft fall of rain. The air was cooler than anything they had known. The streets sparkled. Cars moved like music. The airport was huge, voices, screens, faces of all colors. But the boys weren't scared. They looked around with curiosity, heads turning, eyes absorbing everything. They were escorted to a royal academy, built for the brightest children in the world. Marble floors, robotic classrooms, libraries bigger than houses. The twins didn't blink. They walked in like they were meant to be there. Their humble clothes, their calm eyes. They looked different, but they didn't feel small. From the first week, whispers began. "Who are they?" students asked. "Where are they from?" The twins solved problems professors had written for years. They spoke with precision. They studied not to pass but to understand. Anatomy, physics, microbiology, psychology. By 13, they were lecturing university students. By 15, they were writing papers doctors couldn't believe. The media caught wind. Genius twins from Africa. The headlines read, "Once orphans, now medical prodigies." Cameras flashed. People applauded. But the boys stayed quiet. They always remembered the forest, the rappers, the cold, the nun. Fame could never erase that memory. Despite their fame, they kept a small photo in their room, a picture of Sister Magdalene holding them as babies. Every night before sleep, they touched the picture gently. She found us, they always thought. She saved us. They never forgot. Not even for a day. Their classmates got luxury gifts and fancy gadgets. But the twins? They mailed money home to improve the mission house, bought textbooks for African students, paid school fees for orphans in Nigeria. Their hearts remained in Neko even as their feet stood in Buckingham Palace and their names echoed across Europe. At 21, they both graduated top of their class in medicine, the youngest to ever do so. Their research had changed how diseases were treated. They had developed a portable scanner for tropical viruses, something small villages could use without needing big hospitals. The Queen of England herself heard of their work. She sent for them. Her guards came with a royal letter. Inside the palace gates, the twins stood tall, dressed in sharp suits, faces glowing with grace. The Queen smiled warmly. She named them royal physicians, offering them a place in the royal medical cabinet. Billionaire salaries. Full honor. News of their appointment shook the world. TV channels ran documentaries. From abandonment to royalty, one said. The miracle of Neko, said another. But the boys didn't boast. They quietly visited the orphanage in South London, bringing medicine, toys, books. They didn't own flashy cars. They lived in a simple apartment and read every night. But slowly wealth came. Their inventions were patented. Their hospital in Nigeria opened. They were now billionaires, not just in money, but in wisdom, purpose, and humility. Journalists tried to dig up their past, but it was hidden deep, known only to a forest, a nun, and God. One snowy evening, after a long conference, they sat by the fireplace of their quiet home. The flames danced like old memories. One of them brought out the old blue diary Sister Magdalene had once kept. She had mailed it to them on their graduation day. Inside were all her notes. Day 3, they cried all night. I didn't sleep. Day 100, one said, Mama. They flipped the pages slowly, their eyes wet. That night, they made a decision. It was time to return home. Not just to visit, but to thank, to build, to heal the land that once tried to forget them. They arrived in Neko unannounced. A private jet landed in the nearby city. From there, they rode in black jeeps with tinted windows. When they stepped into the village, people stopped. Mouths opened. Eyes widened. Children ran to call their parents. Women dropped water pots. Men removed their hats. The twins had returned. Taller, stronger, gentle, dressed in royal coats. But their eyes still carried the softness of boys raised with love. The chief came forward, trembling. Is it true? He whispered. They only smiled and nodded. Then walked straight to the small church house, the place where it all began. Sister Magdalene had grown older, her hair now snow-white, her back curved like a bending stick. She was sweeping the church steps when she looked up and saw them. At first, her eyes narrowed, then widened. The broom dropped from her hand. She stepped forward, slowly, unsure. And then, as if the heavens parted, tears rolled down her cheeks. The twins rushed forward, wrapped their arms around her, and held her like a mother lost and found. No words were spoken, just heartbeats, just tears, just silence filled with years of gratitude. That day, the sky in Neko wept too with joy. They didn't come empty-handed. They came with gifts, a new hospital, a library, a school named after Sister Magdalene. They brought solar panels for the village, water filters, medical staff, laptops, science kits, and for their mother, they built a white bungalow with a flower garden. No more bare floors. No more hunger, just peace, just grace. Regina, the stepmother, watched everything from afar. Her skin wrinkled, her face empty. She lived alone now, forgotten, with a cane and a haunted mind. No one remembered her pain, but the twins did. And one afternoon, they visited her too with medicine, not vengeance. She could barely speak. Her eyes were dim, her voice brittle. She looked at the boys she once left for dead and wept. "Why are you here?" her eyes seemed to ask. But they only gave her a warm shawl, food, and a chair. Kindness heals more than revenge, they believed. Regina lived her last years in silence, but with care. The twins forgave but never forgot. Their story was not just of success. It was of scars turned into stars, pain molded into power, and destiny rewritten by grace. The sun rose slowly over Neko, casting long golden shadows across the red soil. A gentle breeze swept through the village trees, whistling softly through the mango leaves. Children played with kites. Women pounded yam. Roosters crowed. But something was different now. The village was no longer wrapped in the cloth of sorrow. There was hope in the air, fresh, like rain after Harmattan. The new hospital stood tall, gleaming like a promise. The school bell rang every morning, calling children who once had no future. And in the middle of it all, the twin boys walked with quiet smiles. Their days were filled with work, but not the usual kind. They weren't just doctors anymore. They were builders of futures, menders of broken dreams. Every patient healed reminded them of their forest cries. Every student they mentored was a child they once could have been. They started the Forgotten to Found Foundation, helping abandoned babies across Africa. Clinics rose in rural places. Mothers received care. Orphans found shelter. The twins refused to let their suffering be wasted. Instead, they turned it into bridges for others to cross. Pain to them was a tool, not a tomb. The Queen of England visited Neko one day. Her convoy rolled into the village like a parade of angels. She wore white and smiled as she toured the twins' home. Reporters followed, snapping photos. Global leaders watched. In her speech, she called them Africa's gift to the world. But the twins only nodded and led her to the one-room church. Inside, Sister Magdalene waited, seated on her favorite wooden bench. The Queen bowed. The world clapped. And once again, Neko became a name known in distant places, not for plague, not for sorrow, but for rising from ashes into glory. Years passed. Sister Magdalene grew more fragile. Her steps slower, her hands thinner, but her eyes still twinkled like stars over water. One night, as the wind whispered and fireflies danced outside her window, she called the twins to her side. She didn't speak long, just one sentence, one tearful smile. Then her breath slowed and stopped. The world seemed to pause. The woman who gave her life to love had quietly returned to the heavens. The twins buried her under a tall tree behind the mission house, beneath a marble stone that read, "She answered a cry." And the world changed. After her passing, the twins established Magdalene University of Medicine. It became the best medical school on the continent. Students from across the globe walked its halls. Her story was taught in every class, not as a fairy tale, but as a living truth. And at the entrance of the school stood a statue of a nun holding two babies in her arms, her eyes full of peace. Every new student touched her feet before entering, a tradition started by the twins. It reminded them all, greatness is not born from ease, but from sacrifice, scars, and selflessness.